Let the grace of God bless man and every woman in this land. Stay strong, keep your faith alive. Whatever comes to meet us, know the darkness won't defeat us. Stay strong and keep your faith alive. Some say the end is coming, to set our souls running, but I say, stay strong and keep your faith alive. Let's all come together, take care of each other. Stay strong and keep your faith alive. Raise your hands in the air. Stay strong and keep your faith alive. Take a stand, say a prayer. Stay strong and keep your faith alive. Hand in hand, side by side, with hearts open wide. Stay strong and keep your faith alive. Help others find their way. Create heaven here today. Stay strong and keep your faith alive.
The body of wisdom is called the Veda, the Vedas, and Veda is usually translated to know. But I believe that the word, that the Vedas are not merely a body of knowledge, but are a body of realization, that we're not talking about information. We're talking about this, when you have this aha, wow, and realizations, particularly when we're talking about these big questions, that the way we learn is through the evolution of our consciousness, this seeing, this grasping, this understanding. I had that experience just a couple of weeks ago when I was listening to my dear teacher, Vanamali, discoursing on that. And she was talking about Sat Chit Ananda. So the absolute, which is beyond quality, is still described as Sat Chit Ananda, being, consciousness, and bliss. And so we want to understand that the ground state out of which everything emerges is being. And again, the sage Ramana Maharshi reminds us that life and consciousness are inextricably bound. To be alive is to be conscious. To be conscious is to be alive. So we only have consciousness associated with life, and a fundamental quality of life is consciousness. So to have this, to experience this quality of being, you must be alive in consciousness you must be alive and conscious by definition. Are you getting that? So when we talk about the absolute as being, we're talking about an all-pervasive being, that we are part of this being of totality. And the totality is being, and that you are an atom in the galaxy of being. You're an atom of being in the galaxy of being, an equal being in this vast, infinite universe of being. And the same way that we're saying that life and consciousness are inextricably bound, that being involves being conscious of being, so that this infinite, this universal, this mysterious life is a living consciousness. And again, you are part of this infinite ocean of living consciousness, that you are an equal being. Again, we always use this example of the microcosm and the macrocosm, that when we take a drop out of an ocean, a drop of water out of an ocean, all the qualities of that ocean are there in that drop of water. So in exactly the same way, all of the qualities of being, all of the powers, all of the forces, all of the gifts, all of the potency and potential of being are here in your being. And all of the mysteries, all of the powers, all of the forces, all of the gifts of life are here in the life within you. That you are a microcosm of this infinite, mysterious ocean of life. And similarly, if we talk about consciousness. So we're not talking about mere ideas here, we're talking about realizations. And the Vedas are a body of realization of the unity and the profundity of life and consciousness. So I like to go back to the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad. Again, there's a commentary on the Vedas called the Upanishads, and I like to go back to the Upanishads, which are the esoteric commentaries upon the Vedas. And often the Upanishads are translated simply as sitting in a circle, knee to knee, as people did for thousands of years. Now we're zooming a little more comfortably, but essentially we're joining a circle of consciousness. So here in the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad, which is considered to be one of the most important, I always go back here as a foundation. As a mass of salt is without inside, without outside, is altogether a mass of taste, even so verily is this self, without inside, without outside, altogether a mass of intelligence only. So this self is a mass of intelligence only. So one of the points that I often make, well, there are a number of things that we want to look at here. Again, the self is the part of you that is actually cognizant, that is actually aware, that is actually present. The quality of the self is lucidity. Now, everything in your life changes except for the self, your own presence in your experience. So your experience is always shifting, always changing from instant to instant. But there is a you that is a constant witness, and we call this unchanging witness the self. And the point of this whole dialogue this morning is to go more deeply into our understanding of the self. Now, we're saying that the self is intelligence. And intelligence, I've always believed that intelligence is the ability to learn. The more intelligent you are, the more easily you learn. That intelligence is the ability to take in your experience and organize it and to comprehend it. And actually, all of nature is a fabric of intelligence, because every atom, every molecule, every cell, everything that exists in nature is a feedback loop, is a cybernetic mechanism in which energy manifests from the source, moves into a field, and then takes in the experience of that field and its interaction with the world around it, and then learns from that experience and self-corrects. So all energy is by definition intelligence, because energy is always moving cybernetically as a feedback loop. creating a state of homeostasis, manifesting a state of homeostasis, taking in the experience of its interaction with its environment, self-correcting, and then redefining its homeostasis. In essence, it is always learning from an experience. So the only thing going on some level in an energy field is this self-correction and homeostasis. That this is nature. Indeed, you often hear me talk about the work of Umberto Maturana, who's like one of the most important voices in contemporary biology, who says that life itself is a feedback loop, that the definitive characteristic of life is that it is a cognitive process. Living, and even in organisms without nervous systems, it is a cognitive process in which these organisms without nervous system take in their environment and integrate that into a self-correction. So the definition of life comes very close to what we're talking about here in our definition of the self. That life is a cognitive process, that life is a fabric of intelligence, a cycle of self-correction. Maturana calls this autopoiesis, self-creating, that living organisms are self-creating, that they're constantly taking in their environment and recreating themselves within that niche of their environment. There's a level of freedom that they've been given to recreate themselves. So we have a graphic here that illustrates this. I believe we do here, amongst all the, okay. Give me a moment here, we add a slide. And we have a graphic here that hopefully will, there we go. So here we're looking at an energy field and all energy fields, as we know in the study of polarity, move from the source out into the field and return to the source. And so here we're looking, Dr. Stone described an energy field as a fountain spray, a radiance, a three-dimensional radiance of energy. So here we're just looking at one vector of that fountain spray of energy to illustrate this dynamic that an energy field is a fabric of intelligence, of energy moving out into the field to define the field and returning to its source. So here we're looking at energy moving out into the field, taking in an experience and returning to the source. Is everyone seeing that our graphic moving? Great. So imagine this not just as one of these, but as of thousands of these radiances of energy moving from the source out into the field. So that an atom, a molecule, a cell is a fountain spray of energy moving from the nucleus out into the field and returning to the source. And so here we're looking at the fundamental dynamic of life, this feedback mechanism. And we also understand that this is the fundamental dynamic, that this fundamental dynamic of recursiveness, this cybernetic mechanism, this self-correction, is the definition of consciousness. So what we're illustrating here is how every energy field is a field of consciousness by definition, that a field is self-correcting, that a field because for me, this illustration is one of the keys to understanding life and consciousness. It just illustrates.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we look at here what Jill Peirce talked about, that the spiral both comes from and returns to its source, that the same energy field is both moving from within to without and without to within, that the same energy is moving, the waves are waving out and waving in at the same time, that there's a level of synergy there, which is just really profound. And then it's both coming from and returning to the source at the same time.
Similar to the ocean waves, how they one goes over, one goes under.
Wow, wow. And it's a continuum whose ends are opposite and yet the same.
Mm,
And it demonstrates cycles of change within the continuum. It demonstrates
beautiful.
alternation of polarities in each cycle, that yin becomes yang, yang becomes yin, that when the dynamics that we see every day in sunrise and sunset and summer and winter, you know,
Mm.
the alternation of polarity in each cycle, and the principles of expansion, contraction through change of velocity, which are just fundamental. Um, Simultaneous movement in either direction towards its two extremities. And on the spherical vortex, these extremities, the center and the periphery, flow into each other. And these extremities are essentially interchangeable, that the center and the periphery are interchangeable. Again, if we think of this not two-dimensionally, but we think of it as a sphere, where every point in that sphere is following this dynamic, where every point in the sphere, see, we've just been looking at this in terms of this, but every point in the sphere, the periphery and the core are exchanging and becoming each other. Amazing, huh? Yeah. So it's not just we're just looking at it two-dimensionally, but every point in the sphere is a point which is embodying these dynamics and where these dynamics are playing out. Just mind blowing, the brilliance of it. Okay. So so we're saying all life fields embody this dynamic, this spiraling dynamic. Now, the next illustration that we want to use, oh, look at that. I didn't click it. The next illustration that we want to look at. So here we're just looking at one of an infinite number of radiations that are defining this field. But every potential point, I guess, as we focus, again, this is at the speed of life and at the speed of consciousness, whatever that is. We're looking at a molecular field here. Energy always moves from the source into the field, following the dynamics of the golden ratio spiral. And the thing about the golden ratio spiral, it allows for this profound recursiveness. So here we're looking here at the golden ratio spiral, okay? And so what we were looking at in the previous graphic was the golden ratio spiral. This animation reveals the profound dynamics of the golden ratio spiral as a mathematical definition of the breath of life. Universally, living energy fields radiate from the nucleus to sustained fields following the golden ratio spiral. This facilitates the dynamic nesting of energy fields from quarks to galaxies as a unified whole. This nesting, defined by the dynamics of the golden spiral, reveals how the microcosm is nested within the macrocosm, and vice versa. Indeed, the word universe means attuned to one coil. This coil is the golden ratio spiral. This dynamic of recursiveness
is the very definition of consciousness.
So this illustration is pointing to the dynamic where energy always moves from the source into the field following the golden ratio spiral. And an energy field defined by the golden ratio spiral is infinitely recursive. So we might ask this question, how does this breath of life spiral from the macrocosm down to the microcosm of the atom, the molecule, the cell? And that is because all living energy fields are attuned to the universe, to one coil. And that coil is the golden ratio spiral. And the golden ratio spiral is infinitely recursive, meaning that within galaxies are nested solar systems. Within solar systems are worlds. Within worlds are natures. Within natures are every level of macrocosm and microcosm, because they're attuned to the same coil and following the breath of life, the life breath of a living universe. There is a level of integration that allows that are infinitely recursive, from the quark, molecules, atoms, cells. Every process in nature is attuned to the golden ratio spiral, the life breath of a living universe. And this allows atoms to nest into molecules, molecules into cells, cells into organisms, etc., etc., etc. So this illustration is attempting to show you the infinite recursiveness of the golden ratio spiral, and the way the mathematics of the golden ratio spiral facilitate and are defined by this quality of infinite recursiveness. So again, we're brought back to this realization that energy, life force energy, is consciousness, that life force energy is intelligence, that the definition of intelligence is this recursiveness that we see somewhat poorly illustrated in this graphic. So we're saying that energy fields are always moving from the source into the field following the dynamics of the golden ratio spiral. So here, so as we contemplate this energy field, what we're seeing is that this energy is moving from the source into the field, and all of the dynamics that we pointed to, that we've been pointing to, are dynamics within the golden ratio spiral. That movement from within to without and without to back within is defined by the golden ratio spiral. So thoughts or questions as we contemplate? Mimi, again, your hand is up again, please.
Sorry, I forgot to take it down.
Oh, okay. So is everyone getting this? Because I believe this is the real key to understanding, or to really a deep level of realization of the mystery of life and consciousness and the dynamics of energy, that this is just really, these two illustrations are just really fundamental. Thoughts or questions? Well, then let's continue with our mantra yoga. In the wisdom of ancient India, for something to be real, it has to be unchanging. So there's only one thing by definition, by this definition, which is real, and that is the present. And the present is the presence of this intelligence, this cognizance, this awareness, which is the definitive characteristic of life, the consciousness, which is the definitive characteristic of life. Now, all of us, some say the goddess was terribly bored there in eternity. So she created this amazing, amazing drama called the cosmic drama. So she could be watching the soaps every day. And that you and I are the soap that the goddess is watching. So she exists as pure presence in each of us, watching this amazing soap of our life. And each of us is kind of as I've said before, that each of us is a vector of the unfolding of the evolution of consciousness. And each of us is the cutting edge of the unfolding of the evolution of consciousness. So we're always kind of like a fly on a bug on the windshield of the cutting edge of the evolution of the universe. So each of us is kind of, just on this roller coaster called life. And we're part of an ever expanding, ever evolving universe in which we're being challenged. As a child, we're expanding physically and then intellectually and then emotionally. And in every moment, there's a level on which we're on the edge of our seat on this roller coaster called life, just expanding as rapidly as we can. So there's always a dance between the possibility of taking a deep breath and staying centered, or just freaking out about the intensity of this ride that we're on, this wild ride that we're on in this roller coaster of life, that there's always amazing new challenges. Think of this pandemic. Who would have thunk that anything like this was going to come along, except in science fiction, and that it would have had the ramifications that it's had so far, and it may be thinking a little more quickly than we are, and maybe a step ahead of us. So it seems. So here we have the possibility of living in reality, that these sages were so grateful because we can stand on the shoulder of these giants who help us, who point the way towards reality, and let us know that it's possible for us to choose and cultivate a relationship to reality, to have some equanimity as we deal with this roller coaster that we're all on. So let us affirm a desire to live in reality, to move from asat, from non-being, to being, from tamas, from that which perishes, into the self-effulgence of this universal light of consciousness, which is right here in your cognizance, in your presence, in your awareness. From returement, the terror of death and oblivion, into the reality of your eternal life, because the life in you is unborn, undying, everywhere, always, eternal, forever and ever and ever. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May peace, may peace, may peace and justice prevail on our beloved Mother Earth. We dedicate our efforts to a vision of a springtime of humanity, where all humanity makes a leap in consciousness and realizes the unity, divinity of all life, where we cherish our Mother Earth as our own dear mother, where we share with each other as brothers and sisters for all our relations. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. May all beings be